Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Managing Unconscious Bias Program webinar. I am Sandra Upton, Vice President of Educational Initiatives with the Cultural Intelligence Center. If you clicked on the link and are listening to this webinar, then you are one of the nearly 250 individuals that have participated in our unconscious bias certification program over the last couple of years. We are excited about the growth of the program and the impact of the program, but we're also excited about the fact that we are always committed to continuous improvement. And so the webinar that you are listening to today is designed to give you an update on some of the changes that we have made to the program. And we wanted to make sure that you as certified facilitators are aware of these changes and that you have access to the new materials. So I'm going to take the next 30 minutes or less to walk you through some of the changes and to make sure that even after the webinar, we are available to answer any questions that you might have. So before I get started in terms of walking through the details of the changes, I just wanted to highlight a few things. The first is that in addition to you receiving the webinar, we did also create what we're calling a cheat sheet, and you'll see that right here on the slide. The cheat sheet just provides you with a very high level of what some of these changes are. So you'll see on this first page here what the original materials look like and what some of the new content will look like. Again, I'll be walking you through in a bit more detail what these changes are, but on a high level, you can see here on this cheat sheet what are some of the most significant changes that we've made to the program. Secondly, in addition to the webinar and the cheat sheet, you as a certified facilitator will have access to our Unconscious Bias Certified Professional Resources page. You'll see the link highlighted here, but once you click on that link, you will see and find that you have full access to the new and improved manual, to the PowerPoint slide deck, to the research research resources as well. Okay, so the new facilitator manual, which you see right here on the screen, you will have access to the digital version of this. And as you can see, it's a new and improved look with a new logo and with lots of really good new content. In addition to the updated manual, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we have an all new and improved updated PowerPoint slide deck that is also going to be available to you on the resources page. So let's get into some of the content changes. I think you'll be excited about them. I know we have received very positive feedback, and we think that you will as well. So first, probably significant change is that we've adjusted the learning objectives. In the original, I believe there were about 4 or 5 learning objectives. We've just simply streamlined those a bit and really worked hard to help participants see the relationship between unconscious bias and CQ. So you'll see highlighted here 4 new learning objectives. The first being to help participants understand why unconscious bias matters. Secondly, help them recognize the sources of unconscious bias. Thirdly, help them identify bias in their organizations and their institutions. And then the fourth, which I think is the most important, is to allow for them to practice culturally intelligent strategies for disrupting bias. Okay, because we've worked really hard to demonstrate the connection between unconscious bias and CQ, we've actually created an entire new session or section just on that. So I want to highlight a few things that you'll find in that new section. So we start out, as we have before, explaining what unconscious bias means. We give the distinction between explicit bias and unconscious bias or implicit bias, which we use those terms interchangeably. We then remind participants if they do have some knowledge of CQ, we remind them of what the definition of CQ is. If they have no formal training around CQ, it's really important that you emphasize the definition here. And then I think we do a really good job of helping you by giving you clear guidance and tips on how to walk them through the relationship between the two. So in addition to giving them the definition of CQ, we then highlight the 4 key capabilities and throughout the training demonstrate how each connects to unconscious bias. At the end of the day, the point that we want to make here with the training at the beginning and throughout is that CQ is the solution to unconscious bias. And the more that we apply CQ, that is when we position ourselves to decrease biased decision making. So when you think about the training, particularly in comparison to other unconscious bias trainings that are out there, this again is our distinctive. It's what makes the difference. And we know, and it's something we've been telling participants all along, and that is that unconscious bias alone is not enough. Just having unconscious bias training without a clear direction on what the solution to that is really a waste of time. And so it's critically important that people see that CQ is the solution, and we do a much better job, I think, in this new and improved version to demonstrate that. Another change that you will see with the new content is that we've beefed up the agenda a bit. And in fact, we provide you with 2 versions. And so the first is an option for doing a half-a-day workshop. And if you were to do a half-a-day workshop, you'll see that these are the 4 areas that we suggest you focus your time on. And we, of course, in the manual give you a lot of detail behind how to facilitate these different sections. But if you were to do a full day, we also give you an agenda for that. And in addition to those 4 areas, we introduce or include another section that we're calling Expand Your Perspective. A lot of the content will look familiar to you because a lot of the focus is around the cultural values. But we do add in perspective taking as a core strategy, as a core CQ strategy for managing unconscious bias. And we give you a lot of new content and examples around that. But again, this version is designed for someone that would be facilitating a full day session, but you have the option of doing both. We've also beefed up the research. So again, given that we are emphasizing the relationship between CQ and unconscious bias, here you'll see that we're emphasizing a lot more on the resources and the research behind CQ. In addition to that, we highlight another framework that we put a lot of emphasis on in the training, and that's Daniel Kahneman's research around unconscious bias. But we also build on the research on covering. And of course, we include Benaghi's work and Greenwald's work on unconscious bias. So emphasizing that very early on in the training and really laying out the foundation for the research we think is really important, and we wanted to put a little bit more energy and content around that in this new set of materials. Another area, and I think probably the most significant changes that we've made is that we've done a lot more work in terms of bringing in more strategies for managing unconscious bias and really allowing much more opportunity for participants to apply the learning throughout. And I'll highlight a little bit of how we've done that. So first of all, if you recall, those of you that have gone through the training before, which would be all of you. But if you recall before, in addition to the manual, you had a series of what we call job aids that would supplement the training, and that would be tools that you would be able to share with the participants to help them, again, apply what they've learned to the content. What we've now introduced is a brand new, what we call CQ Your Bias Participant Guide, and it is loaded with activities, exercises, and tools that will help them to really identify very specific strategies, culturally intelligent strategies for managing their unconscious bias or unconscious biases. So a few examples here. At the very beginning, you'll see here that we talk about what are some of the everyday influences that can impact our biases. So time pressure can be one, but fatigue can be another, distraction can be another. So what might be some strategies, some CQ strategies for managing some of those everyday influences? So this is a part of that CQ, your bias participant guide, and you'll see here that we identify very specific individual strategies that you can put in place to just address these everyday influences. Right? Another thing that we do that we've added to the training is application as it relates to real life experiences. So at the very beginning of the training, we build this in where participants can identify a real problem that they are dealing with in their organization or at the department level as it relates to unconscious bias, and have them write down that challenge. And then throughout the training, we actually have them, based on some of the strategies that we provide to them, we have them think about their challenge. And the idea is that at the end of that training, they actually walk away with some very clear strategies and solutions for addressing that problem. This is new, and we have found that it has worked extremely well in the trainings that we've been facilitating over the last several months. Some additional CQ strategies that we've built into the participant guide. Here, we know a big topic is microaggressions. That is included in the original training, but we've beefed this up a bit by not only highlighting what are some of the common microaggressions that you might experience in the workplace, but how does it show up? What might be the hidden message behind that aggression? And most significantly, how might you respond to that particular microaggression that takes place? Another tool here that is included as part of the practical application, and that's part of the CQ Your Bias manual or participant guide, excuse me, is CQ strategies for hiring. So this would look somewhat familiar to you in terms of we did provide a version of this in one of the job aids in the original, but you can see here that we've added a bit more content here, and you can see very clear strategies, CQ strategies for addressing bias in the hiring process, a checklist, and then there's opportunity for you to really allow participants to practice by taking a look at the checklist, but also identifying very specific areas that they can improve within their organizations or departments. Another activity, we did have this in the original if-then scenarios, but again, we've added some content here. So not only do we provide participants with scenarios, we actually highlight what particular area that this scenario might show up. So is it in the hiring and promotion process? Is it in just day-to-day interactions? You'll see that that's highlighted on the side here. And then we give them some very specific questions to think about. So where do microaggressions show up in this particular scenario? How would you handle the situation if you were a bystander in the room? And what would you do if you were the person on the receiving end of that bias? So just a host of activities and opportunity for practical application all throughout the training. You will see that that has been improved significantly. The other area that we've beefed up a bit is the action plan. So that was a part of the original, but we've now again streamlined that and created a one-page action plan that we're calling a bias busting action plan. And you'll see here, this is part of the CQ Your Bias participant guide as well, but a one-pager where they can go through 4 steps to, 1, identify CQ strategies that you will have talked about throughout the training to manage their bias over the next 1 to 3 months. What are strategies? How will those strategies be used to support individual and organizational goals? And then thirdly, how will you measure the impact? And then lastly, who will hold you accountable to these goals? So just a new and improved action plan that allows individuals to write down these things just on one page, and it makes it realistic and doable for them. We've also added another supplemental piece to the training. So you will find this in the back of the manual, the facilitator manual, and it's focused very specifically around the relationship between unconscious bias and decision making. So in that supplemental part of the manual, we include several CQ strategies for how to disrupt decision-making bias. This is one example that you'll see here on the screen when we talk about decision-making when it comes to working on projects. And what is that process? What does that look like? What are some critical questions that you need to ask? And how does bias show up when we think about different individuals or different processes and practices within the organization? So does it happen at the leadership level? Does it happen when you're dealing with customers or students? What about the organizational culture? And again, processes and practices. So this is just one example of a strategy that we provide as it relates to disrupting decision-making bias. And there are several other ones that are a part of that supplemental section of the manual. So those are overall, those are some of the significant changes that we've made, and we think again they're very good changes that we think have enhanced the program significantly. I want to just wrap up with just a few training tips based on the new content that you have, just to keep it in mind that again, CQ is the solution. You know, again, we know that a lot of people are facilitating trainings around unconscious bias, but oftentimes they fall short of helping people identify strategies that really are going to change behavior, that are really going to move the needle in terms of people not making decisions that have negative consequences on others. So make sure that when you are facilitating the training that you do a great job up front, helping people understand the relationship between CQ and unconscious bias. Leverage it as the distinctive. That is what makes our training different. We know that it's research-based, and we know that at the end of the day, it's CQ that improves performance when we are interacting across cultures and when we are interacting with people that may come to the table with a different set of values. And we make sure that we are managing our biases in those interactions. So CQ is the solution. The second training tip, and this is something that you, of course, know, but I think it's really important as it relates to the unconscious bias, because my experience has been that I've been training this in a wide range of contexts and understanding, you know, whether that's in the domestic setting versus in the international setting. It's made a huge difference in terms of how I structure the training and what content within the training I put more emphasis on. So for example, if I'm facilitating this training in an audience in the US or North America, I find that when we talk about unconscious bias, race tends to be something that the participants want to spend a lot of time talking about. They may also want to talk a lot about generational differences and how we can be biased towards others who may be part of a different generation. But if I'm in another part of the world and facilitating training, those two may not be nearly as big of a deal as thinking about bias as it relates to gender, right, or sexual orientation. So understanding who your audience is and customizing the unconscious bias training to that group is extremely important, and making sure that you're identifying what their priorities and pain points are. The second tip that I would give you would be to really watch your time. One of the things that you are going to quickly discover when you get the materials and you go through them, you're going to find that it's a lot of information. And our preference is always to sort of give you more than less, but you are going to find that you have just plenty of content to work with. And your challenge will be to make sure that you are facilitating the session in a way where you are able to cover the most important content. And that secondly, that you make sure that you build in enough quality time for practical application and action planning. So be mindful of the time, be mindful of the content. The reason, again, that we gave you two different options, a half a day or a full day, is because we know that all of the content that's there, you won't necessarily be able to get through it all in a half a day. So you've got to be smart with how you use it and manage your time accordingly. So at this point, I want to wrap up the webinar. And it was short and sweet, but we wanted to make sure that we at least walked you through some of the changes that are part of the new materials. We are always here and available for any additional questions that you might have. So if you do have further questions around the content, by all means, you can feel free to reach out to me. You'll see my email address noted here. If you have any questions related to logistics in terms of setting up programs, the assessment tool, we're still using the cultural values profile as part of this program. So setting up programs or any questions around accessing the resource page or accessing the materials overall, most of you are familiar with Corey Berkemer. He would still be your primary contact as it relates to the logistics. So I want to thank you for taking time to listen to the webinar. I hope that you found it helpful. We are excited about it and look forward to giving you access to the resource page so that you can dig into the content and see for yourself how great it is and begin to use and facilitate this with others. Thanks so much.